Father, Mother God, we give thanks for this opportunity to be open and receptive to the awareness of your presence. We feel you here and now. We allow your presence to move through us into this moment. Because in that allowance, we experience you. We experience your love, your compassion, your guidance. So we breathe into your presence in this moment. We give thanks. So it is that together we say, Amen. Well, revealing the divine masculine. How many of you have had fathers? I suppose it's possible that now I guess it's still, fathers are still required. How many of you had a challenging relationship with your father? Okay. It turns out that many people do have challenging relationships with their fathers. I know I had a challenging relationship with my father prior to his and my mom being divorced at my age 11. So my memory of my father was one that was distant. I did not have the opportunity to get to know him as a son and father in the traditional mature relationship. So my memories of my father were at best challenging. So as we look at our relationship with our parents, it turns out that our parents are the first expression of the masculine and feminine energies. Some of those energies could be said to be divine, and some of those energies could be said to be profane. And because our parents rarely, you may have a parent or two parents that exhibited the divine masculine and the divine feminine for you, because many of us have less than a divine experience with our parents. We were modeled in those energies. And I call those energies the profane energies, the energies that are a corruption of those divine energies. And our interest in achieving the divine expression of those energies is fairly substantial. Of course, not surprising, because the masculine energy has been such a dominant part of our culture. If you go to Google and you Google divine feminine, you'll come up with almost 5 million hits. If you go to Google and you Google divine masculine, you'll come up with about 700,000 hits. So it's not surprising that there is so much more attention given to the divine feminine as a response to that masculine energy that has dominated our culture for so long. Yet the arising of the divine energies of the masculine and feminine is an important part of our spiritual growth. To be able to balance the divine masculine with the divine feminine is an important aspect of our personal journey. And some go so far as to say that the divine union of the masculine and feminine energies is a prerequisite for our enlightenment. I'm not sure that our vocabulary is precise there, and I'm not sure that I really want to go there in any case. But the divine masculine is something that we need to pay attention to, each and every one of us. You see, the divine masculine and the divine feminine are energies that are present in us, regardless of our gender or gender identity. It's the divine masculine and the divine feminine that give us the fullness of our expression as children of God. I'd like to offer this graphic here for you. Maybe. Could you, is my dongle plugged in? No. We have a, we're now using a cell phone, a smartphone, as our presentation tool. So getting used to, my dongle is in, all right. Really, that's what those things are called. So if we look at these characteristics of the divine feminine and masculine, now one could argue that, well, that's not a complete list, and I assure you that I'm aware of that. But let's just use these for the moment. The divine masculine is the assertive, the logical, the reason-based, the action-oriented, the persistent, adventurous, and strong characteristics of personhood. The divine feminine is the receptive, the emotional, the intuition-motivated, and the nurturing-oriented, and the patient, and the expressive, and the wise. So we look at these energies and we say, well, yeah, I have some of those, and I have some of those, but those expressions are often contorted and corrupted. And so we look at, for instance, the divine masculine, and we see the profane expressions of those. The assertive is the belligerent. The logical is the closed-minded. The reason-motivated is the reason-dominated. The action-oriented is the purposeless motion. The persistent is the stubborn. The adventurous is the foolhardy. The strong is the dominating. So this profane expression of the divine masculine energies is what we see in our culture. We see our international relations that are primarily masculine, profane masculine expressions of a country's consciousness. So if we are going to achieve balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine, we need to first elevate the divine masculine as an objective, rather than focusing just on the divine feminine, which is important. We also must address the divine masculine. And how do we transform the profane expression of that divine energy into a sacred expression of that divine energy? That really is part and parcel of our spiritual journey. We may not realize that, but it is something that when we focus and transform those profane expressions of that divine masculine, I'm a little bit too hot, Patrick. When we allow that profane expression to be dominant in our consciousness, we are kept away from that enlightened state of being. So the practice is to focus on, be aware of, and then focus on those profane expressions and transform those into a sacred expression. That is, to take the belligerence and move it back to be the assertive. And one could say, well, what's the difference between those two? And basically, it is aggression. It is an aggressive expression of assertiveness. belligerence being a tool that we often use to get our way. God knows we are going to need all of the tools we can muster to address the challenges that are coming in not just today, but tomorrow. How many of you have heard of CRISPR? CRISPR? C-R-I-S-P-R. Well, put your antenna up, because CRISPR is going to be the tool that can either be used for great good or for great evil. It's a technology that allows bioengineers to edit the DNA. Can you just let that sink in for a moment? We now have the ability to scan the 6 billion components of the DNA molecule, identify specific genes, and just like using a word processor, we can go in and we can clip out this phrase, this genome, and plug in another. Let that sink in. CRISPR has the ability to, in fact, they already have trials of the correction of muscular dystrophy. I'm sorry, cystic fibrosis. They've already had the success in changing some very significant diseases to make them either, what's the word I'm looking for, non-active, or in the case of mosquitoes, they're now using CRISPR as a means of changing the DNA of mosquitoes so that it cannot harbor the malaria. Okay? Very cool. That's going to save literally millions of lives a year. However, we could also take out the gene for skin color and put in a gene for phosphorescence so that you could be a blue phosphorus or a green phosphorus or a red phosphorus race. It doesn't just affect the individual that is modified. It becomes part of their DNA, which is passed on to future generations. Now, here is a technology that, if it is managed properly, we could see the disappearance of AIDS, we could see the disappearance of malaria, we could see the disappearance of cystic fibrosis. Probably we could see the disappearance of a whole host of genetic and neurological diseases. Yet, it could also allow a biochemist to implant a gene for strength, a gene for aggression. Talk about super warriors. This could allow a country to develop an army of super warriors. Whew. So, we are going to need all of the resources that we can muster to manage the coming age so that we are not put into a willy-nilly chaos. It could literally create chaos in our society, in our culture. And we now have, with CRISPR as an example, we now have the ability to control our own evolution. This Darwinian evolution, been there, done that. That's not where it's happening now. It's with CRISPR. And CRISPR CRISPR was a benign development over a team of many different biologists, and there was two people that said, well, you know, if bacteria can do that, then we should be able to do that. They had discovered a bacterial transformation that occurred, and they said, we should be able to do that, and thus came CRISPR. So keep your eye out, watch for articles on CRISPR, and know that we are going to need the assertive, the logical, the reason-motivated, action-oriented, persistent, adventurous, and strong characteristics of the divine to guide us in our personal actions, to guide us in our selection of our leaders, to allow our society to be progressive but not self-destructive. So, how do we transform the belligerence, the closed-mindedness, the reason-dominated, the stubborn, the foolhardy? How do we transform those into the sacred? First of all, we must observe. We must take an honest assessment of how we express in the world. And when we have identified how we express in the world, and we notice stubborn. My wife calls me stubborn. I insist that I am persistent, but my wife says that I'm stubborn. I need to pay attention to her. And I need to look at that characteristic of stubbornness. And I need to see how I express that stubbornness in the world. And then I need to transform that. And I transform that through the tools that we have in unity. You've heard me talk about the 5 pillars of faith, the 5 principles of unity. One power and one presence, God the good, omnipotence. The Christ, that expression of God, that child of God is present in each and every one of us. And we have the opportunity, we have the choice to express that or not. The thoughts we hold in mind manifest in our experience. We can, in fact, change our life experience. Not necessarily, as some unity fundamentalists would assert, I don't think that we can necessarily change the events that occur in our lives, but we absolutely can change how we respond to the events in our lives by the thoughts we hold in mind. And then here are the 4 tools of transformation: prayer and meditation, denials and affirmations. We've talked about denials and affirmations over the course of the last week. But denials and affirmations are a means of changing our subconscious, changing the recorded tracks that guide our emotions, that guide our habits, that guide our habitual responses. And it's the divine, it's the subconscious that we need to change as we look at transforming who we are and how we express in this world. So the denial, let's take one. Let's say stubborn. A denial is a single expression that takes a power away from, in this case, a characteristic of my personality, as attested by my wife. And you probably should trust my wife instead of me as we look at this. But stubbornness. How do I express that stubbornness? How is it that I am expressing stubbornness in my world? And I could say, well, I express stubbornness when I am insistent upon my grandson finishing a bike ride. Okay, that has come up here recently. I'll use that as an example. Troy and I, and Alexandria for that matter, I have a three-wheel bike, a trailer bike, and Alexandria rides on that, and Troy has his own bike. As of last year, he got his own bike. So we have been out riding. Now, those of you who know where I live up at Fairview High School, which is about 150 feet in elevation above downtown Boulder. But downtown Boulder is an attraction for the grandkids because what's there? Ben and Jerry's. So we will head off on a bike ride going down to Ben and Jerry's. Now, it's about a 4.5-mile ride down to Ben and Jerry's through the CU campus, down the bike trails. I mean, it's all perfectly safe, except when I crash the bike. Alexandria has to suffer the consequences. But so we go down to Ben and Jerry's. We have our ice cream, and we're sitting on the mall. We're watching the musicians, or we're watching the magic show, or whatever. And time to go home. Grandpa, I'm too tired. Troy, you rode down here. You knew that you were going to have to ride back. Get on your bike. Let's go. We got to get home. Grandpa, I'm too tired. Well, this went on, 10 minutes maybe. I was being stubborn. I was not going to call Mom and have Mom come down and pick Troy up because I wanted Troy to have the experience of finishing something that he started. Well, it turns out that Troy had gotten over a cold about 5 days prior, and I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking that he took advantage of my buying him a $3.75 ice cream cone and a downhill ride and not wanting to go through the work of going back home. Well, it turns out that he was still suffering from the cold that he had 5 days prior. And so finally I relented. I called his dad. His dad came down to pick up and took him home. Well, his dad said, David, we can put your bike in there and you can ride home as well. I said, no, I'm going to finish my bike ride, right? So Alexandria and Troy went home in the car, and I finished my bike ride. It turns out I had fun, but nonetheless, my insistence upon Troy finishing the bike ride and the 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes of argument about that, that created an energy that really wasn't necessary. In the end, Troy got home, I got home, Alexandria got home, everybody was safe. And it would have been actually a better experience for both Troy and I if I had just listened to him. Okay. We subsequently, by the way, had another bike ride down to Ben and Jerry's, and Troy rode all the way home, and he was satisfied that he could do the job that he started out to do. Well, okay, so the stubbornness would be, a denial for the stubbornness would be that my persistence does not need to affect my relationship with my grandkids or with whomever. But in this example, I could use the denial that's specific about the grandkids. My persistence does not need to negatively affect my relationship with my grandkids. And then the affirmation would be, my stubbornness. My affirmation would be that my assertiveness provides me with the energy to complete the tasks, the appropriate tasks. My assertiveness, my persistence allows me to finish my appropriate tasks. So I have the denial, one expression. I have the affirmation, 200 expressions. What that is doing is that is taking the power away from this habit of stubbornness and allows instead a habit of assessing, deciding, and choosing to be persistent when it's appropriate. Okay? So the practice of denials and affirmation is a way of changing our subconsciousness, changing our practices, changing our habits And it is a way of allowing us to transform the energies that we express to be positive, to be affirming, to be lifting, to be transforming. And that really is what this is about. Assessing who we are and how we express, deciding whether or not that is a divine or a profane expression of that energy, and deciding, choosing, and practicing the transformation of that. It's all up to us. This is the interesting thing is that we don't have to rely upon anybody else to make that transformation. It is up to us. Practicing, practicing, practicing. That is how we transform the profane to the sacred, the profane to the divine. And as we practice on the divine masculine, so we can practice on the divine feminine. And if you, while we didn't look at it, you can go through and you can look at what is the profane expression of receptivity. What's the profane expression of receptivity? I'm sorry? Selfishness? Okay. What about, I'm sorry?
The profane expression is receptive?
Yes.
Closed-minded.
Close-minded? I was thinking that the profane expression of the receptive is to be walked on. Okay? That doormat. Yeah. What about the profane expression of the emotional? The hysterical. What about the profane expression of the intuition motivated? I'm sorry? Overly practical? The profane expression is not the opposite, but the extension. Okay. The intuition would be the intuition dominant. Okay, that you are relying too much on intuition and ignoring, if you will, the reason. Okay, you're ignoring the opposite. You're taking the intuition to the extreme. Drama. What about patient? I was thinking of immovable, but patient and laissez-faire, that's okay. So take a look at your female, your feminine energies, and see what profane expression you have of those. So this is about balancing these. It's about identifying the profane expression and affirming the sacred expression. It's about being honest with yourself and forgiving yourself. Because we're talking about transformation here. We're not talking about making a mold that you must fit into. We're talking about transforming who we are and how we express in the world. This is our choice. This is our choice. How do we choose to take advantage of this opportunity? We are truly children of the Most High. We are expressions of God in this moment if we choose to be. Let us choose to be. We'll have our meditation. As we come into our meditation, let us come in with I cast all my cares. Breathe into this moment as we allow this moment to be our focus. Allowing the breath to guide us into the present. let us consider what it would be like to constantly be the expression of God, be the Christ expressing in this moment. See yourself as that expression. See yourself not as a incidental expression, but rather as a considered expression, an intentional expression of the Christ. How does that feel? How does that feel to be compassionate towards everyone? To be considerate of everyone? To be withholding from no one? How does that feel to be the reception of God energy, unconditional love, and to be the expression of that in this moment? How does it feel to look upon every face and see the face of the divine? How does that feel to look upon pain and to envision healing? To look upon poverty and envision abundance? To look upon those that we oppose and see them as friends, teachers, counselors. How does that feel to honor each and every one we encounter as the Christ? To see them as the Christ, whether they're aware of it or not, to see them as the Christ. Here, now. How does that feel to be God in this moment? To be expressing the divine energies, the masculine, the feminine, to be a healer in this world. How does that feel? Take hold of that feeling. Carry it with you. Remember it. Recall it. Make it part of your expression of self. And with this awareness, let us come back into this time and this space, sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer.